Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack the stories behind the sources, digging into the facts, the surprising details, and, well, the context you really need. Today, we're tackling a name everyone knows, but maybe not in the way they think. Frankenstein.
That's right. It's become totally synonymous with the monster, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, the big guy, square head, Nick Bolts, he's the villain for most people.
Mm-hmm.
But if you actually pick up Mary Shelley's novel, the original story,
Mm-hmm.
well, it tells you something quite different. Frankenstein isn't the monster.
He's the creator, Victor Frankenstein.
Exactly.
And that's our mission today, really, to kind of push past all the Hollywood layers, the
Yeah.
pop culture stuff that's built up over, 2 centuries,
Yeah.
and get back to the source, Mary Shelley's 1818 novel, Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. It's a Gothic masterpiece.
So we're looking at how this incredible story even came about, because that's a tale in itself.
Oh, definitely. A very weird summer, actually. And we'll look at the science in the book, or maybe the lack of specific science,
Yeah.
and why the fact that the creature doesn't even have a name is maybe the most heartbreaking part of the whole thing.
Right. So the basic setup is this. Young scientist Victor Frankenstein, brilliant guy, manages to create life, a thinking, feeling being.
An incredible achievement, scientifically speaking, within the story's context.
But his reaction, pure terror, he just runs away.
Abandons it completely.
And that one act, that moment of, well, catastrophic failure as a creator, kicks off everything. All the tragedy, the revenge.
It all spirals from there.
Okay, let's start with Mary Shelley herself, because her life story feels so connected to the book's themes. She was, only 18 when she started writing it?
Yeah, incredibly young. 18 when she began, published anonymously when she was just 20.
And her background wasn't exactly conventional, was it? Daughter of William Godwin, the philosopher.
Right, famous radical thinker. But her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, the famous feminist writer, died just days after Mary was born.
That's profound. That idea of losing your mother almost at the moment of your birth.
It casts a huge shadow. You can feel that sense of loss of absent parents throughout Frankenstein.
And that sense of gloom seems to fit the story of how the book was actually conceived.
Mm.
You mentioned a weird summer.
Oh, yeah. We're talking about 1816. It's often called the year without a summer.
That sounds ominous. Not just bad weather, then.
No, this was a global event. It was caused by the eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia the year before, 1815. Massive eruption.
Okay.
Threw so much ash into the atmosphere, it basically dimmed the sun, caused crop failures, constant rain, cold, a volcanic winter, essentially.
So Mary Shelley, Percy Shelley, her future husband, Lord Byron, his Dr. John Polidori,
They're all stuck inside.
pretty much,
Yeah.
cooped up in the Villa Diodati by Lake Geneva, gloomy, damp, boring.
I can just imagine. What do you even do?
Well, they started reading ghost stories,
Yeah.
German ones, translated, called Phantasmagoriana.
Spooky stuff to pass the time.
And then Lord Byron gets this idea. He says basically, hey, we should all try writing our own ghost story, see who comes up with the best one. The famous ghost story competition.
That's the one. And apparently Mary struggled at first, couldn't think of anything scary enough.
Really? She seems like the obvious winner in hindsight.
Do you think? But then one night the conversation shifted. They started talking about the latest scientific ideas, the nature of life itself, reanimation.
And this thing called galvanism. What was that about back then?
Galvanism. It sounds a bit like magic now, maybe. But in 1816, it was cutting-edge science, named after Luigi Galvani.
Right.
It involved using electricity to stimulate muscles. People were doing these sometimes quite theatrical demonstrations, making dead frogs' legs twitch, even using animal or human corpses.
Whoa. Okay, that's creepy.
It was, and it raised this really profound, kind of terrifying question. Could electricity actually jumpstart life? Could you reanimate dead matter?
So that idea was buzzing around her head.
Exactly. She went to bed with all this talk of reanimation swirling around, and later she described having this waking
A
dream.
waking dream, like a
Yeah.
hallucination.
Sort of. She vividly pictured it. The pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together.
The creature.
Yes. And then she saw it show signs of life, animated by some powerful engine. And crucially, she saw the student's horror at his own creation.
That was the spark, the moment of inspiration.
That was it. The fear wasn't just the monster, it was the creator's reaction to it.
Wow.
And interestingly, that same competition, that same gloomy summer, also produced John Polidori's story, The Vampire.
No way. So two iconic horror figures born from the same contest.
Pretty amazing, isn't it? The vampire, as we kind of know him, the aristocratic, romantic figure, starts there too.
And the name Frankenstein. That wasn't just pulled out of thin air either.
No, there seems to be a connection there too. Mary Shelley had traveled along the Rhine River in Germany.
Okay.
And near there is a place called Frankenstein Castle. Apparently, local legends talked about an alchemist, Johann Conrad Dippel, who lived there about a century before Shelley.
And what was he supposed to have done? Experiments on bodies?
Yeah, the stories involved weird experiments, maybe trying to create artificial life, working with bodies. So the name itself already had this resonance, this hint of forbidden science.
Okay, let's talk about the creature. Because the image most people have, Boris Karloff, the bolts, the flat head that's so ingrained.
It really is.
But you're saying the book is quite different. How did Victor actually create him in the novel if it wasn't lightning and sewing body parts together?
Right, that whole visual, the stormy night, the kite, the stitched-together corpse, that's almost entirely from the 1931 movie by James Whale.
Yeah.
Hugely influential, but not really the book.
So no lightning storm needed.
Not explicitly mentioned like that. Victor describes discovering some fundamental elemental principle of life. It's deliberately kept vague.
Ah, so she doesn't give us the how-to manual.
Not at all. He says he spent 2 years on it. 2 years constructing the body.
Constructing it. From what?
This is where it gets maybe even more disturbing than just grave robbing. He says he used materials from the dissecting room and the slaughterhouse.
Like dissecting rooms and slaughterhouses. So not whole bodies, but raw materials, organic components.
Exactly. Bits and pieces. He's building this thing from the ground up, essentially. And it's huge, 8 feet tall.
8 feet. Why so big?
The novel suggests it was easier to work on a larger scale. But imagine it, this massive patchwork being made of who knows what exactly.
That's somehow more grotesque than the movie version.
I think so too. It emphasizes the unnaturalness, the sheer ambition and hubris of it. He's not just reanimating a dead person. He's building a new type of person from organic refuse.
And then he uses his secret principle of life to animate it.
Right. Some unspecified process imbues it with vitality. Shelley purposefully kept that fuzzy. The point wasn't the pseudoscience, it was the moral implications, you see.
The crossing of the line.
Precisely. And Victor's immediate horror and failure to take any responsibility for this life he's just created.
Which brings us back to the name thing, or the lack of one.
Yes. He's never given a name by Victor. He's just called horrible things.
Like what?
Wretch, monster, fiend, demon, vile insect. It's constant rejection.
That's awful. To be denied even a basic identity.
It marks him as an outcast from the very start. But here's the incredible thing. Despite this total rejection, the creature is intelligent. Highly intelligent.
How does he learn? Victor certainly doesn't teach him.
No, he learns by hiding, observing a family, the DeLacy's, living in a small cottage. He watches them through a crack in the wall of a hovel he hides in.
He learns language just by listening.
Language, reading, complex ideas about society, family, affection, all by watching this family he can never join.
Wow. And he finds books too, right?
Yes, crucially, he finds a satchel with some books.
Hmm.
Plutarch's Lives, Goethe's Sorrows of Young Werther, and most importantly, Milton's Paradise Lost.
Paradise Lost. That feels significant.
Hugely significant. It gives him a framework for understanding his own situation, his creation, his abandonment.
Is that where the famous quote comes from? Where he
Wow.
confronts Victor?
It is. It's such a powerful moment. He basically says to Victor, quoting Milton, "I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel."
Whom thou drivest from joy for no misdeed. He sees himself as Adam, the first creation, but treated like Satan, cast out by his God.
Exactly. He understands his potential for goodness, like Adam, but recognizes he's been made monstrous through rejection, like the fallen angel. It's heartbreaking self-awareness.
But that misery, that awareness, it doesn't lead to peace, does it? It leads to violence.
No, it curdles into rage and a desire for revenge against the creator who wronged him. His isolation is absolute, his suffering is immense, and he lashes out.
Who does he kill first?
Victor's youngest brother, William. A child. It's brutal.
Oh, God.
And then, to make it worse, he frames the innocent family servant Justine for the murder. She's executed.
So he understands injustice and then inflicts it himself.
Yes, the cycle of misery continues. Later, he murders Victor's closest friend, Henry Clerval.
Clerval. Wasn't he the sort of counterpoint to Victor, more connected to humanity?
He was. His death is a huge blow. And the final act of revenge is the most devastating.
On Victor's wedding night.
On the wedding night, yes. He murders Victor's bride, Elizabeth Lavenza.
Just unimaginable cruelty. all stemming back to that initial abandonment.
It's a direct chain of consequences. Victor's failure to nurture, to guide, to even name his creation unleashes all this horror. The creature acts monstrously, but his monstrosity is born from Victor's moral failure.
Okay, this scale of tragedy, the way it connects creator and creation, really pushes beyond just a simple horror story. Let's talk about that subtitle, The Modern Prometheus.
Yes, that subtitle is packed with meaning. It's not just a cool-sounding addition.
So Prometheus, the Greek titan, right? Created humans from clay, stole fire from the gods for them.
That's the one. He defied the gods, brought knowledge, fire representing technology, enlightenment maybe to humanity, and Zeus punished him brutally for it. Chained to a rock, eagle eating his liver daily.
Grim stuff. So Victor is the modern Prometheus,
Right.
using science instead of fire.
Exactly. He's this brilliant figure who reaches for forbidden knowledge, creates life through his own fire, the spark of life, electricity, whatever his secret was, and is ultimately destroyed by his own creation and his transgression.
But there's a twist on how Shelley might have viewed Prometheus, isn't there? He's usually seen as a hero, a champion of humanity.
Right, that's the standard take. But there's evidence to suggest Mary Shelley and Percy Shelley, too, had a more critical view, possibly influenced by some unconventional thinkers of the time.
Like who? And what was their take?
Well, figures like Joseph Ritson and ideas circulating within their radical circle, including Pythagoreanism and, believe it or not, vegetarianism.
Have vegetarianism. How does that connect to Prometheus?
It sounds like a leap, I know. But some interpretations, drawing on Pythagorean ideas about avoiding meat for purity, saw Prometheus's gift of fire differently.
Not just as enlightenment, but as...
As the thing that enabled cooking meat. And therefore, Prometheus was seen not just as bringing knowledge, but as enabling this perceived vice, this fall from a more natural vegetarian state.
Wow, okay. So Prometheus wasn't necessarily the good guy in their view. He was maybe a devil figure bringing something harmful.
Potentially. Percy Shelley wrote essays on vegetarianism, seeing meat eating as linked to violence and impurity. So, by subtitling her novel The Modern Prometheus, Mary might be suggesting Victor's act isn't just hubris, it's a deeper kind of error, a philosophical wrong turn against the natural order, almost like introducing a primal corruption.
That adds a whole other layer. It's not just science gone wrong. It's a fundamental mistake about life itself.
It connects the scientific ambition to these deeper ethical and even dietary purity debates happening in their circle. It makes the novel incredibly rich.
And speaking of rich connections, going back to Mary Shelley's own life, all that personal loss we talked about, her mother dying, the death of her own first child.
Yes, her first baby, born prematurely, died just about 2 weeks later. This was in 1815, not long before the Frankenstein summer.
That grief must have been immense.
Unimaginable. And scholars widely agree these experiences deeply inform the novel. The themes of creation, loss, abandonment, failed parenthood, the fear of your creation being monstrous or dying, it all feels incredibly personal.
Victor's utter failure as a parent to his creation takes on a whole new weight then.
Absolutely. It resonates with that profound fear of loss and the weight of responsibility that comes with bringing life into the world. And this is why the book works on so many levels. It's gothic horror, yes, but it's also grappling with these huge philosophical and personal themes.
And it's rooted in the science of the day, even if vaguely.
Definitely. It's pulling from real scientific discussions. People were talking about Erasmus Darwin, Luigi Galvani's experiments. That's why many consider it one of the very first science fiction novels.
Because it's not magic.
Yeah.
It's based on potential science.
Right. As one scholar put it, the key is that Victor makes a deliberate decision and turns to modern experiments in the laboratory. It grounds the horror in the possible, which is maybe even more unsettling.
Now, something I found really surprising is that the version of Frankenstein most people read today isn't exactly the original book.
That's a really important point, actually. There are significant differences between the first edition and the one that became standard later.
So the first one came out in 1818, anonymously.
Yes, 1818, anonymously, just 500 copies printed initially. It was dedicated to her father, William Godwin.
But the version in most classrooms or bookstores now is usually the 1831 edition.
That's right, the 1831 popular edition. Mary Shelley revised it herself quite substantially for that publication.
Why did she revise it? Was it just tidying it up?
Well, Partly, perhaps, but there were bigger reasons. The book had become famous partly through these wild, melodramatic stage adaptations that were happening.
Ah, like plays based on the book.
Exactly. Things like Presumption or The Fate of Frankenstein from 1823. They were hugely popular, but often, simplified the characters, amped up the horror, maybe missed the nuances.
So she wanted to reclaim her story a bit.
Possibly. But also, her own life and perspectives had changed in the years between 1818 and 1831. She'd endured more loss. Percy Shelley had died. Her views might have become maybe a bit more conservative, or at least changed.
So what are the key differences between the 1818 and 1831 versions?
One of the biggest changes is the portrayal of Victor Frankenstein himself.
How so?
In the original 1818 text, you could argue Victor is presented slightly more ambiguously, maybe seen as a flawed idealist, a revolutionary spirit gone wrong. There's a bit more room for sympathy, perhaps.
Okay. And in the 1831 version?
In the 1831 revision, Shelley seems to paint him much more critically. He comes across as more clearly selfish, arrogant, and directly responsible, more culpable for the tragedies. She really emphasizes his guilt and moral failings.
Interesting. So she kind of hardened the judgment against her own character in the later version.
It seems that way. She's making a stronger statement about his accountability. It reflects perhaps her own matured view on the story's themes.
Were there other notable changes?
Yes, a few. The original epigraph from Milton's Paradise Lost was removed in some later printings of the 1831 version, and there were plot tweaks like Elizabeth Lavenza's backstory. In 1818, she's Victor's cousin. In 1831, she becomes an orphan the family adopts.
Why change that?
It possibly avoids the slight hint of incestuous undertones that bothered some readers, making their relationship seem less predetermined, maybe. She also toned down or removed some of the more explicit nods to the radical scientific ideas that were current in 1816, perhaps making it feel less tied to that specific moment.
So the version we usually read is maybe a slightly safer, more morally clear-cut version.
You could say that. It's still a powerful book, of course, but the 1818 text has a raw, perhaps more politically charged feel to it. It's definitely worth seeking out if you're interested.
And how was the book received back then, when it first came out anonymously?
It was definitely mixed. Some critics got it. Sir Walter Scott, for instance, praised its originality and imagination, calling it an extraordinary tale.
But not everyone was impressed.
Oh, definitely not. Some reviews were quite hostile, especially once rumors spread that the author was a woman. One infamous review basically attacked the anonymous female author for forgetting the gentleness of her sex and writing something so shocking.
Wow. Tells you a lot about the times.
Doesn't it? But despite the mixed reviews, the novel was popular. And those stage adaptations, even if they changed things, really cemented its place in the public imagination, even if they helped confuse who Frankenstein actually was.
So wrapping this up, it feels like the main takeaway is that Frankenstein the novel is profoundly misunderstood. It's not really about a monster running amok.
No, not at its core. It's a story about ambition. Yes, about scientific curiosity, but mostly about catastrophic abandonment.
It's about the creator, Victor Frankenstein, and his failure. His name is the one that should carry the weight of the horror, not the creatures.
Exactly. He's the one who sets everything in motion through his fear and rejection. The story is a tragedy born from failed responsibility.
And its legacy is just immense, isn't it?
Oh, undeniable. It's a cornerstone of Gothic literature, romanticism, and, as we said, a foundational text for science fiction. It keeps getting rediscovered and reinterpreted.
People still find it relevant today.
Absolutely. Guillermo del Toro called it the quintessential teenage book, which is fascinating, and it's consistently listed among the most influential novels ever written. Because those themes, creation, responsibility, what it means to be human, alienation, they just don't go away.
So Frankenstein the book, a story of creation gone wrong because the creator failed his creation. The name belongs to the scientist, not the monster.
That's the truth of it. And maybe the final thought to leave people with, something the creature himself forces us to confront.
Go on.
It's that fundamental question he implicitly asks Victor, and that the novel asks us, what is our responsibility for what we create, whether it's literal life or new technologies, AI, genetic engineering, whatever it is?
The question of purpose and ethics.
Right. The creature essentially asks his maker, why am I here? What is my purpose? And Victor has no answer. That void, that lack of guidance and responsibility that must accompany the power to create. That is the chilling, timeless heart of Frankenstein.